We're in the last part of this story in Revelation about the woman, the dragon, and the lamb. The woman was giving birth to a child, and the dragon wanted to kill her and the baby. So he tried, but she was rescued. The baby was taken up to God's throne, which we talked about being the Messiah, and how he did die on the cross, but he didn't stay that way. He was resurrected, and he was ascended. He did ascend into heaven. And that is a contrast. You're going to see today there's a bunch of different contrasts. There's different seals. There are different... Anyway, all this stuff is in contrast to each other. So we have the Messiah who is accepted on God's right hand. And the dragon who wants to be God, who wants to be more powerful than God, is cast out of heaven. So this dragon, once he realizes he can't hurt the baby or the woman, he goes off to fight what he calls it the rest of her seed. We understand this as spiritual warfare. He can't destroy the church. He can't destroy the people of God. And he can't destroy the Messiah. But he can hurt temporarily, physically, individuals who are followers of the Lamb. And so he goes and he fights against them. And the way that he does it, the way that it was set up is, he says, I saw this beast come out of the sea. I saw this beast come out of the earth. And these two beasts work together. Sort of what people have called it the unholy trinity. You have the dragon and the beast from the sea and the beast from the earth. And they make war against the saints. And they win. They kill a lot of saints. And they deceive the whole world. They remember the second beast makes a statue or an image of the first beast. And they worship this. And he's able to make it talk. And, we talked about what all that stuff could mean. But the whole point is that the world worships the dragon, which is what the dragon wants. And the whole world turns against God. Well, God says to us that this requires patience and faith on behalf of the saints. You have to know what this is. And when you do, you're okay with it. Because you see that even though the beast has power, even though the beast is able to do some miracles, he's still just a man. Remember, he has the number of a man, 666. Not superstitious. There's nothing magic about the number, nothing powerful about the number. In fact, I think it's a way to show his limitation. He's just a man. He is not complete. He is not God. He tries to be God, but he fails. And God will save us. Remember, we ended with the story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, how they were threatened. You're going to bow down to this image that I've made, or I'm going to kill you. And they said, oh no, we're not going to do that. We know that God will save us. But even if he doesn't save us, we're still not going to bow down to your image, because it's not God. They could see past where they were standing. They could see past the earth. And they could see past their bodies. They could see the new earth. They could see heaven. They could see their souls. They could see their resurrected bodies. They weren't concerned. Whatever you want to do, you do it. We're not going to disobey our God in this. So, in this story, Revelation chapter 12, chapter 13, and chapter 14. We're in 14 now. We're coming to where the stage is set. The dragon and the beast are persecuting the people of God, but the Lamb is ready to come and save his people. He's going to fight and win. So, Revelation chapter 14, verse 1. And I looked, after the beast came out of the sea and did what they did, and lo, a lamb stood on the Mount Zion, and with him 144,000, having his Father's name written in their foreheads. I can imagine when they read this. I imagine when John saw it and when he told the other people. Imagine how they must have felt. I almost picture them having chills, because there's this battle where it looks terrible. We're going to die. And they felt that way. They honestly must have felt that way, because they were persecuted. Some of them did die. John himself, while he was writing this book, this Revelation, he was on the work island of Patmos, being forced to work under the threat of death. And, why is this worth it? Why is Christianity worth it? Is God really going to save us? Is he really going to come through? Does the promise mean anything? He says, I saw this battle going on, and it represented my real life. It It was right on target for what I was actually experiencing, for what I was feeling. How long, O Lord, faithful and true, until you avenge our blood? Here's this dragon. He's roaring in our faces. There's nothing we can do to stop him. Here's this Roman emperor, these beasts who want to kill us, and they're persecuting us. But then, you know what I see? I look up and I see Mount Zion, and I see a lamb standing there. The lamb. The lamb that was slain and the lamb that was found worthy. And he's standing there with his people, with all 144,000. And it just gives me such hope. Because I'm able now to see how the battle's going to end. I can see that he's going to keep his promise. There are a couple of details that he gives us that are worth noting. First, he tells us that he saw him standing on Mount Zion. What is that? Does that remind you? We've been reading from the second Psalm a little bit. Let's go back there. Psalm 2. And by the way, just like Revelation is singular and not plural, the Psalms become singular when you're talking about just one of them. It's not Psalms 2, it's Psalm 2. Why do the heathen rage and the people imagine a vain thing? The kings have set themselves up against him. They said, hey, we're going to throw off his bands. We're going to break these chains. We're going to do what we want. We're going to get rid of God. And he that sits in heaven shall laugh and have them in derision. He's not the least bit concerned. And then shall he speak to them in his sore displeasure. He's going to vex them. Here's what he says, verse 6. Yet have I set my king upon my holy hill of Zion. So Revelation, when he says, I looked and I saw this lamb and he's standing on Mount Zion, this is a fulfillment of the second Psalm. The world is raging and the nations are plotting and they're saying, we're going to overthrow God. Or you could say, the dragon wants to kill him and he raises these two beasts. And together, they're going to destroy the people of God. They're going to wipe out Christianity. God's not the least bit concerned about their plans. He laughs at them and he vexes them in his sore displeasure. He is not the least bit concerned. He says, all that you've done, all of your work, and yet I have had my way. Yet I have set my king up. And there's nothing you can do about it. And that's why he goes on to say, kiss the Son. In other words, obey the Son, love the Son now, accept the Son, bow the knee to the Son now, while there's still mercy. Don't wait for the end, because at this battle here, this is not an evangelistic meeting that he's about to have. This is battle. He is about to pour out all of his wrath, all of his fury on these people, because Zion's king is ready for battle. The other detail is that he has these 144,000 sealed saints with him. We talked about this before. They symbolize, as far as I understand, they symbolize the completion of the promise. These aren't literal Jews. It's not literally 144,000 people. It's a representation. 12 is a complete number. So we have 12,000 people from all 12 tribes. That's a complete number, 144,000, to show that not one of God's people is missing. He said, I'm going to save you. I'm going to reverse the curse. And here it is. All of them are present. All of them are accounted for. None of them are lost. And they have the Father's name as a seal on their foreheads. And just think about that. I told you this is a chapter that has a lot of contrast in it. You have on one hand the beast, and he says, you're going to wear this mark. And remember, we talked about some people are afraid, I don't want to get this chip in my hand because, my credit card in my hand, because then it might be a mark of the beast. No, you're not going to be confused if you get it. It's not like you have to wonder, is this the mark of the beast? No, it's going to be real clear. This is a sign of allegiance. You belong to me. Okay? The beast has that. You want to worship me? You want to serve me? You want to be mine? You have to be loyal to me. Have my mark. On the other side of that, God has his own mark. The beast got his idea from God. These are my people. And it's written in their foreheads so that everybody sees, everybody knows these people belong to God. And so there's no neutrality here. There's no one who doesn't have the mark. You either have the mark of the Lamb and you worship him and you serve him, or you have the mark of the beast and you worship him and you serve him. There's no in between. If you're for one, you are by default against the other. Well, these people are for God and they are against the beast, which is why they are persecuted. And the whole world stands with the beast. I picture them on one side, facing them, ready for battle. But the Lamb appears on the other side with his saints, and they are prepared for battle. And here's the interesting thing. In chapter 6, we see the saints presented as victims. How long, O Lord, faithful and true, until you avenge our blood? There they are under the altar. They are, it's almost a saddening kind of a scene. But they go from victims to conquerors in chapter 14. No longer victims. No longer asking for justice. They are with him about to dish out justice. And so, when they see this new reality, when they understand their new situation, sparks a song from them. Look at verse 2, Revelation chapter 1, verse 2. And I heard a voice from heaven as the voice of many waters and as the voice of great thunder, and heard the voice of harpers harping with their harps. And they sung, as it were, a new song before the throne and before the four beasts and the elders. And no man could learn that song but the 144,000 which were redeemed from the earth. These are they which were not defiled with women, for they are virgins. These are they which follow the Lamb wherever he goes. These were redeemed from among men, being the firstfruits unto God and the Lamb. And in their mouth was found no guile, for they are without fault before the throne of God. So, before we get into this, I want to first understand the details of who these singers are, or the details about them in general. And first thing John notices about their voice is they are singing in unison. He says, when I heard this sound, it made me think, you ever been to a waterfall where you can't hear? The water's so loud. He says it's like thunder. They were all singing together at once, and it was this overwhelming sound of people worshiping God for what he's done. It was kind of like when we sing the song, we play harps alongside it. That's what it reminded me of, because it's this song of celebration. This isn't a dirge. This is a hymn of praise. They are excited about what's about to happen. They see the enemy on the other side, and they see the Lamb facing against them, and they say, hey, salvation and glory and honor and power belong to our God and to the Lamb who sits on the throne. That was the first song. They're singing a song like that. We are about to win. This is about to be wrapped up. The Lamb is about to keep his promise to us. And so there's no timidity. There is no fear. They're not afraid of the dragon. That dragon, I told you before, this book promises, chapter 1, verse 3, a blessing for everybody who hears and reads it. And people read this and they get terrified because they see this dragon and they see this beast and they see the tanks and the helicopters and all the scary, terrible things. And they get alarmed by it. But that's not what we're supposed to feel as believers. If you don't believe, it should alarm you. But if you are a believer, if you are one of those who have the mark of God, you have nothing to be afraid of. And this is a time of celebration for them. That dragon can roar as loud as he wants. That beast can swipe as often and hard as he wants. But he will not win. This is not the end for us. They sing this song before the throne. They sing it right there in front of God. Earlier in chapter 5, the living beasts, the living creatures, those four, along with the 24 elders, they had their own song. They're singing that song in Revelation chapter 5. And I went back and read it. It doesn't say the saints joined them. I imagine them listening to that song and saying, we want a song of our own. Here this battle comes in Revelation 14, and they say, here's our time. We are going to sing a new song of worship before the throne. And they're able to sing it because they are redeemed. That is, he says they are redeemed from the earth. They are redeemed from among men. That is, that they of all people have been chosen. They have been selected as the first fruits. And you remember in the Old Testament, the farmers would plant their crops and then they would take the first tenth. So if you grow corn, you take the first ear of every 10 and you give it back to God. Because it's a way of saying, look, this belongs to God. Well, he says those people are just like that. These people belong to him. They're able to sing this song because they've been redeemed. And they're able to sing this song because they've been justified. They are considered righteous. And that's what he's talking about. He says they have not defiled themselves with a woman. And that's not meant to be anything against women. It's not just this general, Paul addresses that in Corinthians where people say, you shouldn't get married. That's less spiritual or whatever. Paul says, well, no, that's not true. If you're burning up like that, get married. That's not what he's talking about. What he's talking about here, you realize that in the next chapter, I think it's coming up, Babylon is called the great whore, the great harlot. And Babylon causes the whole world to be spiritually impure through spiritual fornication. They lead the whole world astray. But not these people. We are called the bride of Christ. Is that true? We are called the bride of Christ. Paul told the Corinthians, I have espoused you to one husband that I may present you as a chaste virgin to Christ. Some people read this in Revelation. They say, well, in the end times, there's going to be 144,000 Jewish virgins running around and they're going to be doing all this. I don't think that it demands to be read literally. I don't think it's supposed to be. He's giving us a symbol of God's people. All of them are accounted for. And all of them have remained pure. We are the pure and spotless bride of Christ. All of them have been chaste. They have been reserved for the groom. That's what he's saying here. The whole world runs off in fornication, spiritual fornication. They joined the beast and the dragon and the harlot in going against God. But not these people. They have remained pure and faithful. So they follow the Lamb and not the dragon. They follow the Lamb and not the beast. And the result of that is, he says, they're free from guile. There is no lie in their mouths. They love the truth. They love the gospel. They're without fault. And so there's no condemnation for them. And here's another contrast. You have the whole world on one side who will be crying out, saying to the rocks, fall on us and hide us from the face of him who sits on the throne. And on the other side, you have these saints who are singing a song of celebration, and they are saying with great joy praises to God, and they're confident in that. The other thing that we see here is that the song that they're singing is called a new song that no one else can learn. That's an interesting thing, isn't it? Why is it a new song that no one else can learn? I think when he says that it's new, it's a reference to it being a fresh song. It's a song that has been reserved for this specific occasion. It reminds me of Psalm chapter 40. Go to Psalm 40. Just the first 4 verses. He says, I waited patiently for the Lord. Can you see those saints there? Keep this in mind as we read this psalm. Imagine being a first century believer who's suffering under Roman persecution. I waited patiently for the Lord. And he inclined unto me and heard my cry. He brought me up also out of a horrible pit, out of the miry clay, and set my feet upon a rock and established my way. And he put a new song in my mouth, even praise unto our God. Many shall see it and fear and trust in the Lord. Blessed is that man that makes the Lord his trust and respects not the proud, nor such as turn aside to lies. That is almost point for point what we're reading in Revelation. The whole world turns aside and they follow after lies. But you have this group, this 144,000, who refuse to have guile in their mouths. They refuse to turn away from the Lamb. And so they rejoice in Him. And He says, God has put this new song in our hearts. He's given us something for this specific occasion. We can sing His praise. And here's the other thing. He says that no one else can learn it. Why? Why are these people who represent the whole of God's people the only ones who can learn this song? And I think this is an important answer. They're the only ones who can sing it because they're the only ones who've experienced it. The world is not going to sing salvation belongs to our God when they have no salvation and He is not their God. But the 144,000 who know God's grace firsthand, they know it well, they're able to sing this song. Like He said in that psalm, you have put a new song in my mouth. You have put this song in my heart. You put it in my mind. I know you. Remember what Jesus says? This is life eternal, that they might know you, the only true God, and Jesus Christ, whom you have sent. This is life eternal, that they may have first-hand experience of you. And so when they sing this song, we are talking about a part of their election. God has chosen them for this purpose. If He's made all things for His own purpose, even the wicked for the day of evil, He has also made the righteous for the day of salvation. They are created for this. To sing this song. They're chosen to know God and to know God's ways. And here's the thing, it's not something that any man can decide for himself. When it's put to them, worship the Lamb or the beast, the world chooses the beast. They take His mark willingly, but God has put His mark on His own people. And He says, you're not going to be turning astray. And so they sing that praise to Him, praise to our God, who pulled us up out of that pit, out of that miry clay, and He put my feet upon the rock. It had nothing to do with me. It still doesn't have anything to do with me. It never will have anything to do with me. So praise be to Him alone. Well, they sing this song and then the battle begins. Go back to Revelation chapter 14, verse 6. He hears this song, and then I saw another angel fly in the midst of heaven, having the everlasting gospel to preach unto them that dwell on the earth, and to every nation and kindred, tongue, and people, saying with a loud voice, fear God and give glory to Him, for the hour of His judgment is come. And worship Him that made heaven and earth and the sea and the fountains of waters. So this angel comes along, and he is proclaiming the gospel. Now, you know that the word gospel means good news, right? But this isn't necessarily such good news for the people of the earth. What he is about to do is subjugate them. And so this is more like the promise where He says every knee will bow and every tongue will confess that Jesus Christ is Lord. This angel's flying through the air and he's saying, get ready to bend the knee, whether you like it or not. It is time to fear God because His judgment is now here. It is time for you to recognize that the beast and the dragon are no gods at all, that there is only one God, and you have chosen the wrong side. However, it is good news for the saints. It's wonderful news for the saints. And you say, well, how could God's judgment be wonderful news for the saints? Because this is the end of sin. The curse is about to be undone. The serpent came into the garden. He deceived the woman. She invited Adam to join her. And together they brought sin and death into the world. And nothing has been the same ever since. There has been murder and lies and deceit. There has been all kinds of sin and death in the world. But it's coming to an end. And so I imagine him when he's preaching the gospel. The people of the world hear that and are terrified. And the saints hear that. And they are overcome with joy. We're about to come out of Egypt. We're about to come out of the wilderness. We're about to go into the promised land. And those people who are going around saying, look, everything has gone on the exact same way that it ever did. Nothing has changed since the time of the fathers. Nothing has changed since the beginning of creation. Where's the promise of his return? He's not coming back. And this just reverses all of that. Oh yeah, he is coming back. And his reward is with him. So these people, these believers, really do have a reason to rejoice. Look at verse 8. And there followed another angel saying, Babylon is fallen. Is fallen, that great city, because she made all nations drink of the wine of her wrath of her fornication. And the third angel followed them, saying with a loud voice, If any man worship the beast in his image, and receive his mark in his forehead or hand, the same shall drink of the wine of the wrath of God, which is poured out without mixture into the cup of his indignation. And he shall be tormented with fire and brimstone in the presence of the holy angels and of the Lamb. And the smoke of their torment ascends up forever and ever, and they have no rest day or night, those who worship the beast in his image and whoever receives the mark of his name. So this angel comes along and he proclaims the fall of Babylon. And he brings up Babylon because Babylon is the opposite of Zion. Where Zion is the place where God dwells, Babylon is the seat of wickedness. It is the place where the beast, we're talking in symbolism here, it's the place where the beast resides and where he has his seat, where he has his throne. And God says that time has come to an end. Babylon is going to fall. Well, then this third angel comes and he condemns. So the first angel condemns Babylon itself. Second angel condemns the worshipers of the beast. He says they shall drink the wine of God's wrath. And we see another contrast here. Because earlier he said Babylon is fallen because she made all nations drink of the wrath of her fornication. So you have these two different wines. Both of them do the same thing though. The New Living Translation says it's a little easier to understand. Babylon made the nations drink the wine of her passionate immorality. She had a lust, and she shared it with the world. And they drank it down. They were intoxicated by it. They were consumed by it. And then God comes and he says, if you drink that wine, if you're consumed by that wickedness, that spiritual fornication, you're going to drink my wine as well. And in the same way that you were intoxicated and consumed by the wine of Babylon, you will be consumed by my wrath. It is going to fill you, and you're going to suffer its effects. And the thing is with God's wine, with this wrath that remember we're talking in symbols here. The thing about his is that it's served without mixture. This is 100 proof. It is 100%. There's no softening. There's no dilution. This is being tormented without mercy with fire and brimstone. And there are people who don't believe in the lake of fire. They don't believe in Hades. They don't believe in a loving God who could do that. But this verse seems to indicate, doesn't it? Seems to indicate. It outright says that all of these people will be tormented forever and ever. Their smoke will ascend. This isn't an evangelistic thing. God isn't trying to save them. He's not trying to make them make the right decision. He's not trying to help them or convince them. God comes and his intention is overwhelming victory over them. His intention is to subjugate them. They have made their decision. They have loved the beast. And to love the beast is to hate the Lamb. And so he says, I come to fight against them, to stand for my people. And when I fight the enemies of God, there will be no rest for them. No rest. No relief. But he's talking in the future through all of this. And John has to come back in verse 12 to address the present. This is all I saw these things, and this is what's going to happen. But just hold on a second. Before we get too excited, let's talk about the present right now. Verse 12. He says, "Here is the patience of the saints. Here are they that keep the commandments of God and the faith of Jesus. And I heard a voice from heaven saying unto me, Write, Blessed are the dead which die in the Lord from now on. Yea, says the Spirit, that they may rest from their labors and their works do follow them." So he says, here's the patience of the saints. Or he says, this is how the saints are able to wait. Look, how are you able as a believer to endure the things that Rome does when all you have to do is just sacrifice to the emperor? It's not that big of a deal. Everyone else is doing it. They're going to leave you alone if you do it. You're going to fit right in. Just give it up. You don't have to even give up Christianity. Just admit that the emperor is a God worth serving. Admit that you'll offer sacrifices and join our society and contribute. We're not going to do that. Well, then you're going to suffer. That's a tall order, isn't it? I mean, John's telling these people, hey, come believe what I believe. And they say, well, what do you believe? And he tells them, and it's going to cost you. And they say, well, why should I do that? John says, here is the patience of the saints. Here's how they're able to endure all the things that they have to endure. Knowing the outcome helps them to obey. Knowing the outcome gives them faith. So, blessed are they that die in the Lord from now on. You know what? I think he's talking about the present tense right then. I've heard this before, that there's going to come a time in the tribulation or whatever that, okay, from now on, everybody who dies is going to be blessed. I don't think that's what he's saying. I think he was talking about the future, and he comes back to his own time, and it relates to our time as well. Hey, everybody who dies in the Lamb, whether you die under Nero or Diocletian, or whether you die under the what do you call them? The Muslims, you know what I'm talking about. Jihad. Okay, what is it called? What are they called? ISIS, those guys? Anyway, if you die under them, you're blessed in the Lord. Al-Qaeda, if they kill you, you are blessed in the Lord. Blessed are they who die in the name of the Lord. How is that possible? Why is that? Well, you may look overwhelmed right now, but victory is assured. You may look like victims under the altar right now, but you are more than overcomers. You are more than conquerors through him who loved us. They can hurt the body, but they can't touch the soul. So you're blessed. And you know that you're blessed right now, and you're going to have rest. And that is another contrast. Look, the wicked right now you have no rest. You're running around the earth trying to stay away from persecution. You're constantly having to worry about people taking you. You're taking your family, taking your stuff, taking your life. You have no rest. But the time is coming when you will be at rest, and they will suffer forever. There is no rest or relief for them. Instead, for you, you're going to enjoy the favor of God as your works follow after. And what he's saying is, you were created for good works. You are his workmanship. You are created for good works in Christ. And you're going to reap what you've sown. You're going to enjoy the fruit of your labors. Your works are going to follow you. And when you're standing there in front of God enjoying his favor, you're going to see your works. None of it on your own, all by the grace of God. And you're going to say, what a blessing it is to serve you. What a blessing it is to have this faith and to trust in you. And I admit, during my life, it was hard sometimes to see how it was a blessing. I feel like I could have gotten further if I didn't have this faith. But I know the end. I know the outcome. That those who seem to be ahead, remember that psalm where he says, the wicked seem so blessed because they're fat and they're happy and people love them and they die at an old ripe age and they have an easy life while they're here. But then I see their end. You're preparing them for destruction. We know how it ends. So blessed are they who die in the Lord. They're going to reap what they sow. God will render to every man according to his deeds. To them who by patient continuance and well-doing seek for glory and honor and immortality, he will give them eternal life. He will say to them, well done, good and faithful servants. But the world can only wait for judgment. Look at verse 14. And I looked, and behold, I saw a white cloud. And upon the cloud one sat like unto the Son of Man. Actually, in the Greek, it says a Son of Man. It's not as definitive. Having on his head a golden crown, and in his hand a sharp sickle. And another angel came out of the temple, crying with a loud voice to him that sat on the cloud, and saying, thrust in your sickle and reap, for the time is come for you to reap, for the harvest of the earth is ripe. And he that sat on the cloud thrust in his sickle on the earth, and the earth was reaped. And another angel came out of the temple which is in heaven, he also having a sharp sickle. And another angel came out from the altar which had power over fire, and cried with a loud cry to him that had the sharp sickle, saying, thrust in your sharp sickle and gather the clusters of the vine of the earth, for her grapes are fully ripe. And the angel thrust in his sickle into the earth, and gathered the vine of the earth, and cast it into the great winepress of the wrath of God. And the winepress was trodden about the city. And blood came out of the winepress, even unto the horses' bridles, by the space of 1,600 furlongs. That's 180 miles. So this last half here, this last section, there's some debate. And I'm not even going to get into it. I'm just going to tell you what the debate is. Whether this is the one in the cloud is Jesus or an angel. Regardless of who it is, it looks like Jesus, but there are some good arguments for why it's an angel. Regardless of who it is, he's doing the same thing. He's bringing judgment to the earth. There is some debate about whether, because there are two harvests here, maybe the first harvest is the harvest of the righteous and the second is of the wicked, or maybe it's just twice of the wicked. Doesn't matter. You know how I feel about being dogmatic about something that's unclear. I don't know. I don't think anybody does. What do we know, though, for sure? What do we know? Well, there are some things we know for sure. Whatever this is, first of all, it's a blessing for the righteous. When you read about this harvest, if it is a harvest of the righteous, you know we're getting out of here. If it's just a harvest of the wicked, you know that they're going to be judged. It's a blessing no matter how you look at it. The other thing is that while we are blessed and have a lot of joy in this, the world can only expect terror. The angel comes from the temple where God dwells. He's on a mission. He's not going rogue. He's not on his own thing. He comes out of the temple where he has heard the command of God, and he is going to thrust in his sickle and judge the world. Another angel comes from the altar where the saints are, where they're hoping for justice. How long, O Lord, until you avenge our blood? And that's what this whole passage is about, is the blood of the wicked. So if nothing else, this harvest is God's justice. At the very least, it is God's judgment and his final vengeance. Remember when he says, I will have vengeance. Vengeance belongs to me. And then you see the wicked getting away with everything. You see them living these long lives, and they're taking advantage of everybody around them. They're cursing God. They're blaspheming. And you're saying, well, when are you going to take vengeance, God? This is it right here. The time has come. And he compares them to grapes. I saw these grapes being put into the winepress. And what they did, they either cut a hole in a rock. So you have a big rock, and they just cut a big tub into it. Or they would dig a pit and fill it with rocks, and they'd make these channels so you fill it with grapes, and you get in there and you start stomping on them. You smoosh them. And as you do, the liquid drains to the bottom, and it hits these channels, and it goes out into the wine vat. They collect what they called the blood of the grapes, the grape juice. They collected that. and then they could make wine or whatever out of it. He says, I saw something like that happening to the wicked people. They were gathered up like grapes, and they were put into this winepress of God's wrath, and then they were squished. They were squished until blood came out of them. See, it is time. What is the payment for sin? Wages of sin is death. There is no forgiveness without the shedding of blood. We're past the point of forgiveness. The time for the sin debt to be paid is now. I saw him take them. I saw this horrifying scene where he put them into the vat or the winepress, and he began to execute them. He began to squish them. It reminds me of the verse, you don't have to turn there, Isaiah 63, verses 2 through 4. He says, why are you red in your apparel? Why are your clothes all stained red? Why are your garments like him that treads in the wine vat? He says, I have trodden the winepress alone. And of the people there was none with me, for I will tread them in mine anger and trample them in my fury, and their blood shall be sprinkled upon my garments, and I will stain all my raiment. For the day of vengeance is in my heart, and the year of my redeemed is come. There are people who only believe in the love and patience and mercy and forgiveness and all of the positive words that we associate with God, to the exclusion of this. Look at the image that God puts here in the gospel. This angel comes out proclaiming the gospel. You're about to bend the knee. Not good news for them. You're about to be gathered up like grapes and trampled down in the winepress of God's wrath. And it is a dreadful, terrible, frightening thing to fall into the hands of the living God. I want to close this up talking about, I'm going to give you just 3 things really. 3 subjects this passage touches on. First, I think primarily, this is all about judgment. This passage addresses God's judgment, and it presents to us a world that deserves it. People talk about free will. They talk about innocence, age of accountability. Are those things biblical? Are those things scriptural? When we talk about free will, what we have is you are dead in your trespasses and slaves to sin. So that even when you can decide, you are at enmity with God. The natural man does not please God, does not do God's will, and cannot. Jesus told some Pharisees, you are of your father the devil, and you want to do what you see him do. His will you desire to do. And he was a murderer from the beginning. When we talk about the innocence of the world, we talk about, well, what about the people who've never heard? Listen, the people of the world, from top to bottom, remember Romans, are without righteousness. And they are without it willingly. I think it's Peter, says that they are willfully ignorant. There is none righteous, says Paul. No, not one. There's none that seeks God. There's none that understands. They have turned away. They have held the truth in unrighteousness. They have suppressed the truth. They rage and they plot. How can we overthrow God? How can we break the chains away from him? There's no one innocent. There's no one who understands. The world is deserving of the full wrath, the full judgment of God. They have embraced the dragon. They have embraced the beast. They have rejoiced at the suffering of God's saints. When those 2 witnesses were martyred, they rejoiced and sent each other gifts. The lines are drawn, and there is no neutrality. What does light have to do with darkness? They don't mix. And so God's vengeance on them is terrible, and it is complete. They are tormented forever and ever with fire and brimstone. The smoke rises forever, and they take it seriously now, what Jesus said about fearing him who could only hurt the body instead of fearing him who could hurt the body and the soul. But like I said, it's good news for the saints. The very first psalm says, "Blessed is the man that walks not in the counsel of the ungodly, nor stands in the way of sinners, nor sits in the seat of the scornful. But his delight is in the law of the Lord, and on his law he meditates day and night. He is like a tree planted by the rivers of water, which brings forth its fruit in season. Whatever he does prospers, but not so for the ungodly. They are like chaff that the wind blows away. Therefore, they shall not stand. They shall not stand in the judgment. Nor shall the sinners stand in the congregation of the righteous, for the Lord knows the way of the righteous, but the way of the ungodly shall perish." Terrible news. God's going to judge the whole world. He's going to burn it up. He's going to throw it and everyone in it who's against him into the lake of fire. That is terrible. Unless you're a saint, unless you're a believer, unless you are marked with his mark and love him and his ways, then you're going to see this and you're going to say, "Blessed is the man who can stand in the judgment because of the grace of God and the blood of Christ. Blessed is the man who loves God, because when judgment comes, he will survive it." This is the end of sin. This is the end of wickedness. This is the end of the curse. Sin is punished and wickedness is removed. So this is such good news. The other thing that we see here, the second thing that we see here, is God's faithfulness. Blessed. Blessed are they that die in the Lord from now on. They're blessed because they have an assurance of their future. Just like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. We're not worried about what you do to us. You're going to burn us up in that thing. It's going to be over in no time. But God, he will resurrect our bodies. Our lives are going to go on. Our works will follow us. We'll have rest in him. There is this end coming to sin. And the cost that it costs us now is worth it. How does that saying go? He's no fool to give what he cannot keep, to gain what he cannot lose. You're going to trade your life for your soul. There's no cost. There's no sacrifice in that. I mean, it may be a terrible sacrifice, but is it not worth it? What sacrifice is not worth it? To lose your body and gain your soul. And so that's why when those Christians were standing there and the world was saying, "Well, just give in a little," and they said, "No, we can't give in a little," it was because they could see the future and they knew the blessing of those who died in Christ and lived for his name. So they're blessed because they have no fear of the dragon or the beast or even of the whole world. But it's not easy. It wasn't easy for them, and it's not easy for us. It requires patience. It requires obedience. And it requires faith. When he says patience, it means you have to endure. You're going to have to finish the race. You're going to have to finish what was started. When it comes to obedience, it means you're going to have to obey. And sometimes that means you're going to suffer for it. But you know what? You're never going to miss out on anything. By obedience, I please God. I'm not missing anything from the world. And with the faith, that means we have the ability to celebrate right now. I heard that voice, and I was overcome. They were singing that song. We were able to celebrate right now what God has done for us and what God will do for us. Because through all of this, This is the third thing. We see God's glory. You see, this is a chapter about judgment, and it is a chapter about God's faithfulness, but it is a chapter about God's glory. He seals his saints and he keeps them. Not one is lost. He judges the world. He fights and he wins. And he is worthy of worship. He is worthy of a new song. And that's what we come away with in Revelation. The blessing is in seeing the glory of God through his judgment and through his faithfulness. And so we sing his praises. We sing his song. Lord God, we thank you for your salvation. We thank you for our lives. Teach us to be faithful. Cause us, put it in our hearts, to serve you alone. Come quickly. In your name we pray. Amen.